Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. Today is Thursday, February the 13th, 2025. Happy Eternal Day, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart.
And we're glad you've joined us. And I'm going to turn this over to him and talk to you later.
Welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here and that we get to engage this conversation one more time as we enter into this arena of understanding the world through the eyes of energy. So delighted that you're with us. And a quick update, Ryan started yesterday on his, I've got him on a steroid of some kind, and his ear seems to be doing better by the hour. And so it looks like, basically what he's got left to do is just to work through the balance of the healing dynamic, the recovery dynamic from everything that he's been through. So appreciation from everyone for holding the space and extending love in his direction. And delighted that we get to have this conversation again today. I'll start out with an inquiry. If anyone's out there in listening land that has a thought for us, then please push the call button and let's have a conversation about it before I move in the direction of getting into a topic. And we're going to pick up from yesterday's show. Unfortunately, the archive was totally not available, so I'm going to go back over that material. And unfortunately, we had problems yesterday, so the show just did not work. And we've actually got a new version, if you haven't updated it, of the listening app. I believe it's been approved. Was A&D yesterday was telling us that it had been submitted, so probably approved. So glad that you're here and delighted to be moving forward. The culture has a couple of sayings that tie into what I was talking about yesterday that came up in a conversation with someone else today that fits very perfectly. And one of the ideas or one of the basic principles of this work is that perception is a construct of the mind. And if we live in the world of perception, then we're living in something that's trying to replicate the truth, but really doesn't come from the truth and is not the truth. And so seeing things, understanding everything through the eyes of energy gets us closer and makes it easier to bypass the frauds that the mind serves up to us and taps us into the truth of what's going on in this energy system. If we listen to Einstein, one of the basic principles of this work, Einstein says, "On such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter." So we don't live in a material world. We live in an energy world. So we want to build the brain cells for seeing everything through the eyes of energy. Because if we don't, then we're apt to make mistakes. And this couple of little sayings I'm going to share with you are a perfect example. So we have this phrase that goes, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder." Now, why would absence make the heart grow fonder? If somebody's away from, do you think that's really true? No, that's absolutely silly. But when you see things through the eyes of energy and you realize that if there's someone that you are familiar with, the other half of that statement is familiarity breeds contempt. Of course, it's another fraud when you understand it through the eyes of energy. So why do you suppose absence would make the heart grow fonder? Well, if you are a member, as most of us were raised to be from very, very early times in our lives. In fact, most people joined the church at about the age of 4, is my take, where we became card-carrying members of the one world universal religion of blame. And of course, that blame game is somebody else is responsible for what's going on in my life. And thank you, Susan, for that update. The sound is excellent. Good news. It is good news about Ryan. And so thank you for keying in and letting us know what's happening, and holding the space for your vacation there to be just wonderful. Hope things went well last night at the concert. So again, why would absence make the heart grow fonder or familiarity breed contempt? Well, if I have something in me that I'm in denial of, what is denial? I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. And so when I say familiarity breeds contempt, what am I saying? There's something painful inside of me, and when you get close to me, you resonate that energy. And as long as I live in denial, I take that very energy that's in me and I turn it into my brain's image of you. And you show up with my problem attached, which means, of course, my hostility is going to be pointed at you. So familiarity brings someone close who resonates something you don't want to deal with, and you think that it's got to do with the familiarity. That's the lie of the when we judge the world through the eyes. The eyes themselves rather than through the understanding of energy. So there's nothing about familiarity that breeds contempt. It's just that if you're close to me, you resonate what I don't want to deal with. It turned into pictures. Now the other side of that, absence makes the heart grow fonder. If you don't understand energy, that makes perfect sense. Gee, if I haven't seen somebody for weeks, somebody that I really care about, and I haven't seen them for weeks, I go, oh, I pine for them. Come closer. Where are you? Where are you? Well, if there's someone who resonates a particularly wonderful thing inside of me, I like to be close to them. I like to look at them. I like to share time with them. Why? Because what they resonate in me are the things that the energetic patterns that I like and I cherish in me. If they go far away and they're the one person who can resonate that, it's because energy over time, if not re-stimulated, decays away in its amplitude. You know, if you're right there with me and this wonderful stuff that I hold related to you is resonating, things are wonderful. But if you disappear for a time period, let's say that energy decays away, cuts down in half, then, gee, my fondness grows. I want you back because I don't realize that what I'm missing if you're not there is that which is in me that I do not normally live in unless you're around. So really capturing and understanding things from the eyes of energy becomes a major key in understanding how the world works, and in particular, being able to clean up one's mind. If one thinks that familiarity breeds contempt, then they're going to want to get away from the person who resonates what they don't like in themselves. So, I mean, just think about the behaviors that people do when contempt comes up in them and they're blaming someone else for it. If they only understood that behavior or that trauma in them that's resonated by this person who's close to them was their trauma, then they'd free themselves of it, and that person would be just as welcome as anyone else. So just using this as an example to build the brain cells for understanding through the eyes of energy. I was talking to a therapist who was in a conversation about how a client had really hurt them. And, it was just straight up, they hurt me. They were the cause of my pain. And of course, the question I would ask the person who's in that kind of pain is, oh, are you sure that they caused the pain in you? Or did they just show you some of your own pain content? Did they just show you what's inside yourself that's up for healing? pained perceptions, I mean, short of somebody punching you in the nose, pained perceptions come from pained content. There is no other source. And if I think or speak as though my pained content is caused by someone else because someone else happens to resonate it for me, then I automatically dissociate from the content of my own mind and disable my ability to heal that which is moving in me. So getting past the belief of the culture that it's about somebody being close or some being far away, awakening to the work that needs to be done, letting go of the blame game becomes urgent. Energetic patterns, usually from either genetic or early traumas in life, sooner or later must be faced, must be processed through and removed from the structure. And that's the whole skill set that we're looking to support every person on the planet having access to. So recognizing that if we're holding an energy that doesn't belong in the system, the purpose of life is to kick us right square in the limitation, to show us exactly what we've got to face, exactly what we need to deal with. Until we see through the eyes of energy, rather than the belief systems we've been given about every energy that's distasteful is somebody else's fault, we need to recognize that everything that we feel, we're feeling because it's moving inside of us. You can't feel something moving outside of you. And so a simple test on whether or not what you're feeling is yours or not is, are you feeling it? It's actually been a while since I've told the story, and since we have some new listeners, there's a story that's actually one of Jeannie's favorites that she just loves when I tell it. And that is the story about the little old lady who loved movies. She was really into movies, and she hears about this new film in town. She leaves home early. She's going to get to the theater to get her front row seat. She's a little hard of hearing. She doesn't see very well, but she just loves her films. And so off she goes, big traffic jam up. She gets trapped in traffic and gets to the theater late. There's one seat left in the theater, the very back row. And she's stuck behind this very loud couple. And in particular, the girl in this couple is just laughing hysterically. And this lady can hardly see, she can hardly hear. Finally, she reaches over the seat and jabs this girl on the shoulder that's laughing so much. She says, "Young lady, are you feeling hysterical?" And the girl kind of hesitates a little bit and finally looks around as well. Well, he was feeling mine first. The truth is, you can't feel anybody else's. So a simple, though the mind can lie, if the mind's given instruction to lie, what is an instruction that causes the mind to lie to you? You made me mad. Remember, the human mind has this awesome capacity to turn thoughts into pictures. So instead of the truth, I've been through this mad 87 different times with 42 different people. When I say you made me mad, that thought means that I have to hide the truth from myself, and that thought is going to be converted into a picture of you making me mad. And I'd offer that simple principle, we live in a culture where people talk about, right, these days there's this conversation going on around a lot of the culture that's speaking about the fear of the one world religion. And the truth is, the one world religion's been around for a long, long time. It's been here for eons. It's a religion of denial, blame, and victimhood. You made me mad, you made me sad. You hurt me. If I hold those thoughts, my mind will literally show me a picture world that will prove that my thoughts are true, no matter how much my mind needs to lie to me. Once one renounces this religion of blame, ownership of what one is feeling becomes obvious, and the conversations and the thoughts about others being cause comes to an end. And probably half of the trauma in the world is caused by conversations based in those thought disorders. Because all it takes, especially in close relationships, all it takes is for someone to speak a word of blame to someone who had a power person that was always putting their trauma off on the child. And that person, I don't care if they're 80 years of age, is going to be sensitive to that, even somebody coming close to blame. And what do most people want to do when they're feeling blamed? They move away, they separate. They make up stories about what's wrong with this person and why they should be leaving. And that is at the root of probably 99% of the world's trauma. Once denial is overcome, then the removal process begins. Once one leaves that church, that religion of blame, then one begins to start to see truly that any untoward experience they feel is a result of an energy, again, shy of someone punching them in the nose, it's a result of an energy that they're holding within themselves. So, and this removal process is called forgiveness. Literally, if you're ever going to truly function as a human being, if you're ever going to raise children who function as human beings, everything unlike the presence of love in you must be uprooted. The skill we're looking to support people in developing is a skill of reversing the process of what it is that causes feelings. Recall the opening words in the book of John. In the beginning was not the word, but the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Plug in once again to the cell biologist Bruce Lipton, who's showing us that when we think a thought, that thought produces a molecule. That molecule lands on a cell, and that cell receives the energetic integration of that thought. What we're looking to do is to support people in developing a set of skills, understanding, practicing, and using a set of tools with which to reverse that process. Literally, to be able to reach in to your own cellular structure where feelings occur. When you think a thought, neuropeptide, that neuropeptide lands on the cell, and my offering would be, this isn't coming out of the lab, this is just what I've been shown. My conclusion is that when that neuropeptide hits the cell, you being a creator, the creator has given you the gift. And the gift is emotions that tell you about the quality of your own creative process. What are you putting into the cell? So everything needs to be uprooted. So we're looking to support people in developing the skill to literally move into the cell, access the chemistry, pull it out of the cell, bring it back to the neuropeptide state, and then to be able to decode the dissociated content of their own thoughts that are at the root of their pain. Now, you say, gee, I watched this, let's say this airplane flying through the air and doing acrobatics. And I look at that and, I took my first lesson the other day in flying planes, and I just got it off the ground and I got it safely back on the ground. It's impossible to do acrobatics with an airplane. Well, obviously, acrobatics can be done. How many hours do you suppose that person spent in the air? Where do you suppose right now, if we were to have the phone number for Tiger Woods, where do you suppose he is right now? I bet he's on the golf course, either practicing his driving, putting, chipping, or he's playing in a tournament. Now, is Tiger Woods one of the world's best golfers? Because he's one of the world's best golfers? Does he have that skill because he's just innately got that skill? Or do you suppose he's on the course, he's been on the course for years, and the better he gets, the more time he spends on the course? Well, when you realize what's in your genes, we get this, what's in your wallet? A much more important question, what's in your genes? If you go back to the Aramaic language, and let's start out by redefining this word for anybody that's new to the show. The word sin in Aramaic is an archery term. And that archery term, if you fired at the target and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell, sin, you're off the mark. That's all the word means. When they said the wages of sin is death, what they were saying is, if you put enough off the mark or disintegrative energy into your tissue structure, your tissue is going to be destroyed, and the result will be death. Now, from the guy who first flew an airplane, his first lesson, to the acrobatics, how many hours, how much time, how much practice? It's interesting with this work, people get the idea, oh yeah, this sounds great. You mean I can face everything in my genetics? I can face the sins of my fathers, yea, unto 3 and 4 generations? Now, when they gave us that piece of information, that was just telling you how your physiology works. That any unresolved disintegrative quality of energy that's off the mark, that is put into this human energy system, is literally physiologically stored as what we call chemistry. And if the chemistry is of a disintegrative nature, then the cell is going to exhibit some form of dis-ease condition. Now, when you go back 4 generations, if you do the math, that's counting yourself and go back 4 generations, that's 31 lives. Who told you? Has anybody ever told you that you literally have every thought, every feeling, every emotion, every reality that has gone through the minds and the physiology and the nervous systems of everybody in your genetic structure in the last 4 generations? How much of that, knowing what you've been through in your life and looking at what you know of parents and their parents and their parents, how much of that do you suppose was of a disintegrative nature and remains yet unresolved in your bloodline? And then if you just sit down and do the math, go back 30 generations, you're looking at 1.6 billion people. 31 generations, 3.2 billion people. 32 generations, 6.4 billion people in your genes. And if you were brought up in the world of denial, they made me mad, they made me sad, they hurt me, it's their fault I'm experiencing this. When you come out of denial, then that removal process, if you're ever going to fully heal your physiology and your bloodline, is going to be pretty intense. And as you choose to do your work and develop those skills, there's no choice about what's going to begin to surface. What's going to begin to surface is whatever is held within you. And if that makes sense or doesn't make sense and you have a question about that, push the call button and let's have a conversation about it. Or as Jeannie just said, I just looked at the notes and she's suggesting type a question in if you've got one. If you want to steer the conversation in a slightly different direction, then put it in the notes or push the call button and let's have a conversation. So the next thing to be aware of, once you realize, okay, I'm developing this skill, then each time I hit a new level of vitality, I'm going to have access to a deeper layer of what is unresolved within me. You know, imagine we've got somebody that is on a scale of 1 to 10 is at a level 5 vitality. And within them, they have a level 7 toxin. Let's say it's a generational pattern. And that generational pattern kind of pushes its head up. It's maybe discomfort. It maybe is inappropriate anger or inappropriate disturbance at something it's disproportionate to what's going on. And somebody knows it's there and they're like, oh, I want to get rid of that. I want to deal with that. I want to deal with that. I want to get rid of that. And it goes on and on and on and on. And they're like, what's the deal here? Why am I not free of this yet? Well, if you're at a level 5 vitality and you have a level 7 toxin in you, if that level 7 toxin were to be yielded up, it could literally, physiologically destroy you. It's not going to surface. The body-mind unit has this, as an energy system, has this built-in suppress mechanism, and whatever you have hidden from yourself until you're at a vitality level where you can handle it without doing damage, it's going to remain in hiding. So as you do your work, as you come into peak experiences of connecting to the presence of love, connecting to the truth of who you are, you add to your vitality, and each time that happens, you're going to end up with an opportunity to look at something that yesterday you had no access to. So the person who's at the level 5 vitality starts doing their work and they get to a level 6 and they're like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. They get to a level 7, I'm feeling great. Get to a level 7.5, man, oh man, I went to bed last night. It was so awesome. I was so high. And I don't know what happened, because when I got out of bed this morning, I was lower than a snake's belly. What happened? Well, when you hit that level 7.5 vitality, the body-mind unit says, hey, remember the level 7 toxicity we've never wanted to deal with, but we've always wanted to get rid of? Well, now it breaks loose and it's in your face. In the system of medicine that I'm trained in naturopathic medicine, that's called a healing crisis. It is an absolutely desirable state. Unfortunately, most of what are called healing arts go, oh, you've got symptoms, let me give you a pill to shut your symptoms down, and it drives the vitality back down into the dirt. Every drug is a disease disguised as a cure. You've never heard of anybody being healed by a disease. Oh, you've heard of symptoms going away? Yes. If I can lower the vitality of this part of the system, I can lock that into tissue. But what does that end up being? That ends up being degenerative disease. So each time you hit a new level of vitality, you want to stand, understanding from the point of view of energy, you want to stand in a place of willingness to embrace whatever it is that needs to come up. And you know, it can look like anything that's happened in the last 100, 200, 300 generations of your bloodline. Which is why it's not Dr. Feelgood, and why you want to develop the brain cells to recognize life and recognize yourself from the point of view of energetic patterns and allowing those energetic patterns to surface. Because each time you have a healing crisis, you need to step into a new level of commitment to do your work. Because the danger is that the deep, slippery trap of blame that comes with each new mountaintop experience can reassert itself, go back into the blame game. So each time you give yourself a big sigh of relief and, wow, I just worked through a big one, then reinforce your willingness to develop the skills and to go to the next level of vitality that it takes to move through that. And few, unfortunately, unless they're properly guided, because of the blocks to maintaining this state of active present love and the generational pain that's been shut down on an energetic level into the energy system is so traumatic, most people don't want to face it. And that's why we're working. That's one of the reasons we've been doing this show for the last 15 years, is so that there's always a conversation available with someone who's been through the process. Because if you're looking at life through the eyes of what your culture, your family culture, your religious culture, your broader culture have taught you, there are a lot of lies going on. Now, when you hit that peak experience, it's like, awesome. This is like such a profoundly wondrous state. It's so cool. Am I ever glad that I live here now? And when you first start doing your work, that's not going to last very long. Because that next level of vitality means that the next layer is going to come up for healing. The undoing process must be engaged. And everything, unlike the new desired state, that higher, more connected state of love, every energy that vitalizes means that it's going to reveal whatever comes next, whatever needs to be dealt with next in terms of generational patterns. So there's no choice about what's going to come in. New level of vitality is going to show you whatever's there. And I can't emphasize enough the value of willingness. I'm willing to embrace. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to allow any emotional experience that resides within me that is unresolved to surface, no matter how traumatic it might be. And be aware that you will very likely face some of the traumas in your family system, particularly that the family talks about, but nobody wants to deal with. So awakening to the work that needs to be done as a result of a powerful opening experience is urgent. And it's perhaps more important than the opening itself, because opening to a new level of vitality means I get to look at a new depth of my own structure. So tasting this deep, this awesome presence that is at the root of our very lives is the objective of this work, and to support people in developing the skill and the ability to literally reach into their own cells. Now, when you first start doing this work, that might seem like, the guy who first flew the airplane trying to conceive of doing acrobatics. That's crazy. You can't do it. But as you do your work, you'll find that you will develop deeper and deeper levels of skill in being able to face and process through, literally removing the very causes of death from your whole family system. I go back into my original electronics training and physics training. Energy is eternal. What does that mean? That means that you and I are eternal. If the physicists are right and there's only energy, and energy is eternal, then you and I must be eternal. Why do you expect to die? Because there are energetic patterns within us, and it's become a tradition down through the ages to die at a certain time, at a certain age. So literally, everything unlike the new desired state of love, including death, needs to be embraced, needs to be held in that condition of love and in the breath, because the action of the breath delivers literally the active presence of love into the deepest parts of the cell, which creates the undoing process. You remember the line in the Course that says, you need not seek for love. You need only seek, find, and release the barriers that you built within yourself against it. So So as each new level of the experience of self, of your created essence, which is love, and if you ever doubt that, just take a moment, get quiet, and go back to the time that you first held a newborn child. Each time a new level of opening and connectedness has been reached, there will be a new peak experience available. Each new peak experience will open the space for the next block that needs to be undone to surface and be undone. So every energy pattern that has ever interfered with this connected state of love, every energy pattern that's stored in the structure, and literally for most people, it's looks like, if you were to look at it from a scientific point of view, it would look like chemistry in the cell. And this is one of the things that's tricked people into thinking we live in a physical world. Because somebody says, oh, we saw that happen, and every time we saw that happen, we saw this chemical in the cell. Therefore, the chemical must be the problem. What's a chemical? Mind energy becomes flesh. Think a thought, becomes a neuropeptide, lands on a receptor site, shows up as chemistry in the cell. Forgiveness is the removal process of reversing that. And of course, the pain of those assault energies, those toxic energies, can be pretty intense. So most people, when they start to move, what's the first thing they do? They hold their breath. Stop breathing. Don't want to deal with this. Because they've deeply hidden away what they don't want to deal with. How many of, as you do your work, have kind of been in a wow state to yourself when you really work through an issue and you went, God, I had no idea I was carrying that around with me. And then you realize you've been carrying it all your life. That's called being unconscious. The objective of this work is to clean up the unconscious. Now remember, in the ancient scriptures, the word for the unconscious was the heart. When they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life, they were saying, take care. Develop the skill and the ability to reach into your own cellular structure, reach into your own chemistry, reach into your own genes, and remove what never belonged. What killed great-grandma, great-grandpa, great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma, grandpa? What disintegrative energies cause their physiological demise? And are you willing to go back through all of your genes and give up death? Forgive death. Remembering that forgive means remove. So each time a new vitality is reached, a new depth of unresolved dynamics in the mind, the body, and the nervous system are loosed in the process. And once you reach those new levels of vitality, because since vitality moves everything that would inhibit it, these toxic loads can no longer be kept in hiding. Unconscious dynamics, when activated, work their way into awareness. But sadly, rarely do they work their way into awareness in their true and honest form. Why? Because we were trained in the one world universal origin to blame. And the minute that I put a blame thought into the equation, and something that's surfacing in me that I now have the opportunity to heal comes into awareness, my mind will literally turn that into a lie, a picture that I will be defrauded with. So that denial game is initially used to inhibit looking at the truth of painful experiences. Notice the person on the thousandth experience of raging at somebody screams words like, "You make me so angry." Never stopping to realize that every time they've been angry, They were there. The anger isn't about anybody else. And so the mind, until you see everything through the eyes of energy, the mind shows you pictures of its lies, of its thoughts produced in form. Anger, as opposed to being an emotion, is an internally generated state that is a drug. If you're controlled by anger, I love how Albert Einstein said it. He said it very well. He said, anger dwells only in the bosom of fools. And you look at people, down through the years working with people, I can't tell you how many people they were so enraged defending their anger and how good it was for them. And what is it that we rage against? We rage against the energetic patterns in ourselves that hurt. And the rage itself is a literal internally produced chemical that anesthetizes against feelings. Again, when Yeshua said, or the scripture said, take care of the heart, the unconscious, for out of it are the issues in life. A physicist, David Bohm, in the worksheet, we refer to a quote or a phrase that David Bohm coined: sustained incoherence. And basically, David Bohm, he was literally a cohort. He worked with Einstein in his lab at one point. He did some of the math that allowed them to produce the atomic bomb. He also worked in the arena of the mind. And so this unconscious, or the heart, as it was called in the scriptures, he called it the darkness in the human brain. So he spoke as a physicist, philosopher, and he spoke of this peak state that we can experience when we're willing to let go of what inhibits us as a supreme intelligence that communicates through the mode of insight. That when you forgive, when you collapse the trauma-based energetic patterns in the mind through forgiveness. And there's only one place in over half a century of working and looking, and I've looked all over the globe and I've looked at everything I could find. There's only one place I have found the tool that consistently, persistently empowers people to collapse the lies of their minds, the projections, the false perception. And when they are collapsed, because they collapse in on their own footprint, allows them to go into their own unconscious. And, there are just so many places you find this single piece of information. Carl Jung says it so beautifully. Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. David Bohm calls it the darkness in the human brain, that we have to go into that darkness. Enter into the desert. That's another code word. When they talked about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years, they were not talking about them getting lost in a 35 square mile hot sandy place. That's absolutely ridiculous. There's a group of people that knew all about astronomy. You think they didn't know how to get out of a 35 square mile area? No, the unconscious is the dark, or the desert is a code word for the darkness. What is the darkness made of? It's made of everything that's killed everybody in your bloodline ever. You remember, if you read that story about the Jews wandering in the desert, how did they get out of the desert? What had to happen? They said the old generation had to die off. That did not mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. Is that fitting? Is that making sense? Does that leave anybody with a question? If it does, hit the call button. Put it in the chat. If this is making sense, great. Let's just keep it rocking. So we see from everything from physics to scripture to psychological studies that this unconscious state, this desert state, this darkness of the human brain has to be faced, and it is a reflection of generational unconsciousness. And that when we collapse that, I love how David Bohm said it. He says, a supreme intelligence communicates through the mode of insight. That's where you get that flash of insight, that flash of creativity. I remember years ago, I was in South Florida, on the southwest coast of Florida, and they have the Ford Museum and Thomas Edison's workshop. They actually were neighbors. They lived next door to each other in South Florida. And they still have, if you go to Edison's lab, they still have it there. And Thomas Edison, he knew to look for this supreme intelligence that communicates through the mode of insight that Bohm talked about. When Edison, as an inventor, found he ran out of ideas, he was dry, he had an old metal frame cot. It's still in his, at least it's 20 years ago, I was there, maybe more than that, but the cot that he used to use. And he explained that what he would do when he needed insight is he had a heavy iron ball. He would lay down on the cot and he'd put his arm out over the edge of the cot. And he would allow himself to go into an altered state, at which point his arm would relax, the ball would drop, and when he hit the floor and made a noise, bingo. That's what Edison said were his creative moments. He would just reach into the air and take those ideas down. And that was the root of his inventiveness. Now, if your heart, your unconscious, is filled with all kinds of unresolved sadness and grief and rage and hatred and vengeance and blame, there's always upset, there's always disturbance, there's always, all that garbage going on. How are you going to get to that pure, untainted insight? You go back, they were working on this whole thing, sadly it was turned into a religion. It isn't a religion, it's about where you live. You go back about 2,500 years ago, and Jeremiah says the heart, or the unconscious, is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? He didn't have forgiveness. He's saying the unconscious has got so much crap in it. How can you ever figure it out? You can't figure it out. Remember how many times I come back to the number one pseudo solution of the non-being mind is, if I could just figure this out. Believe me, I promise you, you will never figure it out. Not in the next 10 billion years. But at any instant, you can forgive it. Well, unconsciousness has become the norm in our society. It's totally and completely unnatural. You look at the craziness that's going on in the political system, the outrage, the pain, the number of people who are in terror, the number of terrorists who are just out there. It's become the norm, but there's nothing natural about it. It's totally and completely unnatural. Being controlled by that unconsciousness is literally, in the terms that David Bohm presented it, is being run by the darkness in the human brain, which, according to Jeremiah, is quote unquote deceitful above all things. And then, according to Carl Jung, until that darkness in your human brain, the unconscious, becomes conscious, it will direct your life. And you will call it fate. People go, oh, well, that's just the way life is. No, that's the way you are. My offering is the reason there's so much pain and trauma in the world, suffering, disease, starvation, is because everyone makes their decisions based on the facade of truth issuing forth from the unconscious, and it's all lies. And that leaves one unable to access the deepest intelligence in themselves, and it leaves one working out of the reactive mind. You look at that word, how did you react? How did you do something done on a previous occasion? We're not designed to be reactors. We're designed to be originators as human beings. Our deepest design is that of literally, thank you, Gary. And Natalie, delighted that the space is opening for you. Thanks for your participation at the end of the show. So it's just, when I confront it, when I bring all this together, I look at, Bohm as a world-class physicist. I look at Carl Jung as probably one of the greatest psychiatrists that ever existed. I look at Yeshua, I look at Jeremiah, and they're all saying the same thing. The brilliance of that. And yet, people are out there doing a religious trip and not doing the very thing that those who initiated what became their religions were trying to inspire people to do. And that was to free themselves from living in the lies, to forgive the lies that had gone on in their generations and their culture and remove themselves from it. So when hidden content surfaces, it's just a reflection of that next depth of pain that we need to learn to work through. But then there's this trick of the unconscious. The person who lives in denial now literally generates a picture world that transparently projects its own unhealed trauma into the brain's perceptual construct of the person being blamed. Now, if you want to take a look at a really good presentation on that, make a note, jump on YouTube, and look for a TED Talk by Anil Seth, Anilseth. Anil's a neuroscientist, university somewhere in England. And he does a beautiful presentation on that TED Talk of explaining how the eye sees nothing, that everything we see is produced by the brain. Aria, who's now 6, she was about 4, and some of you've heard me tell this story before, but she was about 4, and the instant she started to comprehend the body, she wanted to know about healing. And she would spend 45 minutes an hour at 4 years of age in front of YouTube watching something on anatomy or physiology or healing. And one day she asked me, she said, "Papa, I want to watch that video on the body." And there's a particular kids video. There's a thing called the Kids Learning Tube. If you've got a young one, check out the Kids Learning Tube. And they have a video on anatomy. And basically it shows an outline of the human body and all the organs in the body. And then the organs fall out onto the ground in order of size, the smallest to the largest. And in turn, each body part, each organ, sings what its place is in the scheme of things in the body. And one of them, the eyes, it's their turn to sing. So the eyes sing their part. Now, here's Ari, she's about 4. And the eyes sing, "I am your eyes, I am your eyes, I see the world around you." Ari turns to me and looks and says, "Papa, they don't understand, do they? We don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain." She never been told that. If the object of attention for your goals is someone outside of you, or you're in the blame mode and it's yourself, then your mind is going to present you a literal picture that you will see that will be a fraud. Your brain will produce the image that you command it to produce. And the core of forgiveness is the ability to collapse that. How do you collapse it? The driver that drives the process of building perception is the goals you hold. The most dangerous trap in doing one's spiritual work is projection. especially if one's just had a peak experience. The newly uncovered rage, grief, pain. The therapist that, I was mentioned at the beginning of this, it was blaming one of their clients for, puking on them. And it was not easy to get it, even as a therapist. I can remember in the early days when I was writing Why Is This Happening to Me Again, I went and read books on forgiveness, everything I could find. And it doesn't matter whether it was the minister or the rabbi or the scientist, the psychologist. In the end, every one of the books would ask the question, how did that make you feel? That is the worst question that you could ever ask somebody, because nothing can make you feel anything. Nothing in the world can make you feel anything. But if it's in you to be felt, any experience in the world can resonate it. So for this therapist who's really therapying himself through his client, who's all upset with what the client had to say to him and how it hurt him, it's like, wait a minute. That hurt was going on inside of you. And when you have a peak experience, remember that following up very closely is going to be the next layer of what you need to deal with. Beware of that. Because if you're in that peak experience and, it's like, I'm enlightened, now all of a sudden the insight that the problem is Bill over there, you can be tricked into believing it. So, somebody rationalizes themselves. Well, I just had this wonderful new insight and peak experience, so my perception must be on track, right? Any form of hostility or fear instantly, or blame instantly informs you that your perception is based in corrupt data and you need to get rid of it. And when you get rid of it, the ultimate getting rid of it is going to be to develop the skill and the ability to literally reach into your own cells, into your own genes, pull that chemical up to the surface, back to the neuropeptide state, decode it, breathe through it, and let it go. Now, cognitive awareness will oftentimes be a part of that process, but it's not required. If love is present, if the breath is moving, then you can move through things that otherwise would take years to work through in normal therapy. You can literally dissolve those things in an instant. And it's not as if you have to go through every piece of garbage in the bag and figure it out. My experience is if there's a particular experience that you process through, collapsing perception means you get to process through it energetically. If you put the energetic dynamic into perception, then you have to deal with he said, she said, this happened when then, all the terrible stuff that went on. If you really can leave that dissolved, leave that collapse, then you can just breathe into whatever the trauma energy is, whatever the sadness, the grief, the rage, the hate, the fear, the pain, whatever it is, you can simply breathe through it. And if there's something important for you to learn from it, then within a very short period of time, there'll be the insight. Oh, that was it. So correction lies in understanding that all mind constructs containing any form of fear or hostility, or even the slightest irritation or projections. And look specifically at the goal that's driving it, collapse the goal. That's where the work is done. And everybody loves that idea when they start to understand it. And when they start to access what's underneath it, nobody wants to do it. Each must work through whatever is loosed by the peak experience that they have. And what we're here to do is to support you in developing that skill set as we interact with you, and we learn to develop it ourselves on the next level. And so thank you for joining us. I hope that your year is the best year yet of your eternal life, and pass it on to somebody. The world needs it right now. Blessings. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.